Anyone who has seen at least a few Studio Ghibli films will notice a recurring character type: headstrong young girls with shoulder-length or up-done hair and adventurous aspirations. Often they are the main character, like Kiki and Nausicaa from their eponymous movies, or Chihiro from Spirited Away. But even if they're relegated to a supporting role like Fio in Porco Rosso or Shita in Castle in the Sky, they remain fearless and headstrong, differing greatly from the main or supporting female role tapped as the one-dimensional love interest in many Western kids' movies. Famed mangaka Adachi Mitsuru has a similar pattern for his female characters throughout his works. Many critics and fans joke about how his characters look exactly the same in every one of his stories, and they're not wrong. But these same-faced characters serve a purpose. They clue us to the character's personality type before they've even said a word. Nowhere is this clearer than with Adachi's girls. Early in his career with manga like Touch and Miyuki, Adachi's main girls generally took one of two designs, either the conventionally pretty one with shoulder-length hair or the conventionally pretty one with longer hair. I emphasize conventional because with their subservient attitudes and balancing act between virginal words and hypersexual behavior, these characters feel fashioned straight from the Disney princess modeling clay. There's nothing exactly feminist about them. To Adachi's credit, he's developed a more progressive understanding of his female characters over the years. Added to his list of recurring girls is the tall one with modern eyes, the little sister with pigtails, and the boyish one with short hair, all with varying levels of internal complexity and feminist attributes. Most Adachi stories will have one or at most two of these characters in prominent roles, but Cross Game doubles down by having an all-star cast represent the four Tsukishima sisters, one of the story's two central families. None of them veer away from their roles as predetermined by Adachi's previous stories, but by simply having four strong female characters to counterbalance the one male lead, Cross Game demonstrates stronger feminist themes in its willingness to let girls run a story about boys' sports. Not necessarily strong feminist themes, mind you, but certainly stronger than Adachi's previous works. Let's begin with the firstborn Tsukishima sister. Ichiyo embodies the tall character with modern eyes, seen previously as Sachiko in Touch and Miyako in Itsumo Misora. All of these characters are framed as attractive potential love interests and serve as sage-like figures to the lead characters. A quick side note about Adachi's eyes. Most of his characters are drawn with retro oval-shaped eyes reminiscent of early anime like Astro Boy, but some characters like Ichiyo are drawn with more modern angular eyes. Often this represents beauty, like with Nita and Sachiko in Touch, but also clues in on the character's role. Both Nita and Sachiko serve as counselors to Minami and Tatsuya, often seeing things in them that our heroes fail to see in themselves. Miyako's eyes jump even further, allowing her to literally see into the future in Itsumo Misora, though only briefly in certain intervals. And though Ichiyo doesn't have that superpower, as the oldest of the Tsukishima sisters and the de facto caretaker, she uses her preternatural wisdom to great effect, often to point out things that Koa and Aoba can't see. She's mostly a fully formed character, with the loss of her mother forcing her to grow up faster than the rest of her sisters, and so doesn't see or need much growth throughout the story. We'll continue with the second-born, Wakaba. If you've read an Adachi manga, then you've run across Wakaba's face. Conventionally pretty, shoulder-length hair, fun and headstrong, good at everything, liked by literally everybody, and our main character's love interest. She's Yuki in 9, Kasumi in Hiatari Ryoko, the younger Miyuki in Miyuki, Minami in Touch, Ami in Rough, Koga in H2, Misora in Itsumo Misora, and most recently Otomi in Mix. Only in Itsumo Misora does our Wakaba-looking character play the hero. Everywhere else, she's at most the romantic lead. And that's the role Wakaba plays in Cross Game, though thankfully she's not as subservient as earlier iterations like Miyuki or Koga. She has very defined plans for 10 years ahead, as well as a contempt for anyone who gets in the way of her goals. She has no problem telling Ko what's what, though she's as kind as can be when speaking to strangers. Everyone loves her, and she loves our hero, which makes her death just that much more upsetting. A seasoned reader of Adachi's works would look at Wakaba and think, yes, main girl, she's safe to get attached to since she'll be around forever. But nope, she certainly is a main girl, but we don't see her for very long. That distinction goes to her younger sister, Aoba. The Aoba-looking Adachi girl makes fewer appearances in his works, though when she does appear, she often plays a bigger role than the Wakaba-faced Adachi girl. Athletic, messy, short-haired, and usually defaulted with a scowl instead of a smile, she appears as the main character Minatsu in Slow Stepped and Wakaba-faced but a personality match with Katsuki in Katsu. The Aoba-faced Adachi girl straddles the line between preteen tomboy fantasy and classically beautiful high school heartthrob. She excels at sports, often intimidating boys with their athletic superiority, and doesn't have much patience for anything that stands in her way. Slow Step's Minatsu is a nice rough draft of this character, while the hard-nosed but classically pretty Katsuki seemed to be a soft transition into Aoba, a more realistic combination of the two. This leaves us with Momiji, who sticks out as the little sister in a couple of Adachi stories. The Momiji-faced Adachi girl has pigtails and endless spunk, serving as comic relief and the matchmaker for her parents or older siblings. She shows up as Chika in Slow Step and Chiaki in Katsu, coincidentally the only other stories where the Aoba-looking character also shows up. She's here primarily to be cute, but her mischievous matchmaking often helps move the plot along, making her a not insignificant part of her stories. Chika's cunning attempts to match Minatsu with her father make her arguably Slow Step's most important character, while Chiaki's otherworldly ability to dodge and throw makes her Katsu's funniest. Momiji plays an even more important role to our main characters in Cross Game, as her 11-year-old self represents the last age anyone saw Wakaba alive. Ko plays with Momiji often not only because she's fun, but also because Momiji is his last chance to remember Wakaba as he once did. Even though Cross Game gives voices to more female characters in Adachi's previous works, it's tough to call the show feminist at all. Rarely do we see the Tsukishima sisters talk about anything amongst themselves other than Ko, the Azuma brothers, Asami, or any of the other boys fighting for their attention. We learn just enough about Ichio and Momiji to have them interact with our main characters, but not enough to see them beyond their one-dimensional selves. We may get a lot of characters, but it's kind of disappointing that we know so little about the women in the show's central family. But not as disappointing as what we get from Aoba. Though Cross Game is my favorite show, its central story of an inexperienced pitcher suddenly dominating Japanese high school baseball has been done before, a handful of times by this mangaka alone. But a story about a high school girl defying expectations to play center field at Koshien? That's a story I want to read. What we get instead is a story about a talented girl coping with archaic regulations based on entrenched cultural values about gender roles. And I guess that's fine. It's supposed to be realistic after all. But we also get a 17-year-old boy who can throw 100 miles an hour and a 16-year-old girl who can touch the mid-80s, who both happen to grow up next door to each other. Isn't this kind of a fantasy as well? And if it's a fantasy to begin with, what's wrong with letting Aoba play with the boys? A lot of my issues with the Tsukishima sisters and Adachi's girls in general are wrapped in both modern sensibilities and Western cultural values with an admittedly limited understanding of Japanese societal norms. From what I can tell, Studio Ghibli's girls tend to be a loud exception to the role of female characters seen on screen, and expecting Adachi's girls to take the same path is wishful thinking. So maybe it's more enjoyable if you just take Adachi's girls at face value. If you ignore the problems of normalized gender roles, it's easy to see what the Tsukishima sisters are meant to represent. A delightful family of young girls meant to bring out the best of youth while coping through loss. And even if that doesn't live up to their potential, it certainly boosts what could have easily been an unremarkable story.